Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Bible Study Done Simple. This is a channel where we just go verse by verse through a Bible study. I'm doing this basically to create a verbal account of a topical Bible study in order to effectively create just more content that you can listen to instead of read. I have some young kids that I work with who don't really like reading, but they do want to study, and they find that listening and videos are more helpful for that. Now, being able to look through sermons and stuff and online teachings, that's something I do a lot. Um, and having topics, but usually those teachings are very condensed. And not only are they condensed, but it's difficult to find something that's not really denominationally leaning. So whether you're cessationist or charismatic, um, whether you're complementarian, patriarchal, or egalitarian, um, those are the two kind of big ones that I see come up. Um, and in those camps, whenever you're watching videos, what ends up happening is that a lot of those doctrines tend to bleed into the teaching itself. Now, whether that's just a consequence of of having these great divides, or whether that's perhaps an active choice on the part. I don't know, and it's kind of a case by case basis. But what I'd like to do here is not really take any doctrinal hardlines so much as study the concepts in isolation themselves and really just exegeting things from the text, which means to read the text and then pull the information out of that. Now, sometimes we do need additional information, additional studies. I'll do my best to quote any sources, um, or if I'm taking information from someone somewhere, I will definitely endeavor to pull those out and make sure that they're clear as to where I'm getting that information from. If anyone wants to fact check, and please do, I encourage you to do so. Now, this week, I'm continuing the love series, but we are going to be working in just Deuteronomy. So I showed before how if you have Logos Bible software, you can go into a range and create a custom range in order to go through the passages and only highlight the books that you want to be looking in. Um, Now, we're still going through the original numbers, the original counts that I have. If you want to go back and check those counts, please go back to the first video in this series. But the important part here is in Deuteronomy, there's 28 results in 25 verses. So 28 results of love in 25 verses. Now, what's really interesting is there were, I think, 60 or 66 counts of love. Um, Basically, the important part here is about half, just shy of half of all accounts from Genesis to Deuteronomy uh, occur in Deuteronomy itself, which I think is really cool, as well as it really it gives us a good picture, right, for what the focus of Deuteronomy is as a book. And so for us to start, Deuteronomy 4:37, but what we're going to do here first is go to, so Logos has an introduction on Deuteronomy that I'm just going to read real quick. Deuteronomy, which means second law, is a retelling by Moses of the teachings and events of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. It includes an extended review of the Ten Commandments and Moses' farewell address to a new generation of Israelites as they stand ready to take possession of the Promised Land. Moses reminds them of God's faithfulness and love, but also of God's wrath on the previous generation of Israelites because of their rebellion. Repeatedly, he charges Israel to keep the law. Deuteronomy is a solemn call to love and obey the one true God. There are blessings for faithfulness and curses for unfaithfulness. The book closes with the selection of Joshua as Israel's new leader and the death of Moses. So, like I was saying, we're going to scroll down here to chapter 4. There's 3 and 4. Um, so this is a retelling of Exodus through Numbers, kind of a shorter, condensed version for a second generation. So a first generation that truly failed and couldn't live up to that phrase, steadfast love, that God promised. In order to see it in return, um, we don't see that. So God brings the people out of Egypt, and for their continued unfaithfulness and their fear of not succeeding where God has promised them success, for not trusting in His steadfast faithfulness and that joint obligation. Um, we see that Israel basically has to change generations, so they wander in the wilderness. And so this is Moses commanding to the new people. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you, and do them, that you may live and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord your God of that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you. Your eyes have seen what the Lord did at Baal Peor, for the Lord your God destroyed from among you all the men who followed the Baal of Peor. But you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. So he's basically setting this up. He's going to start giving the commandments, right? Um, and he's going to be more specific about them. So getting not just into having no other gods before me, but to really nail down and say that the cause of your forefathers' demise, some of your forefathers' demise was idolatry, and that was a big problem that Israel had and continued to have. Excuse me, and that continued idolatry is something that was very costly to them. And so Moses is encouraging the next generation to not grow up as their parents did. Um, and he's going to spend, as you can see, quite a bit of time speaking both blessing and cursing. So if you let's say uh, here in verse 25, when you father children and children's children and grow old in the land, if you act corruptly by making a carved image in the form of anything, and by doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, so as to provoke him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that you will soon utterly perish from the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess. You will not live long in it, but will be utterly destroyed. And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will be left few in number among the nations where the Lord will drive you. And there you will serve gods of wood and stone, the work of human hands, that neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him, if you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. when you are in tribulation and all these things come upon you in the latter days, you will return to the Lord your God and obey his voice, for the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not leave you or destroy you or forget the covenant with your fathers that he swore to them. That's steadfast love again. For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and ask from one end of the heaven to the other, whether such a great thing as this has ever happened or was ever heard of. Did any people ever hear the voice of a God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard, and still live? Or has any God ever attempted to go and take a nation for himself from the midst of other nations by trials, by signs, by wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, by great deeds of terror, all of which the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God, that there is no other beside him. Out of heaven he let you hear his voice, that he might discipline you. And on the earth he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, and chose their offspring after them, and brought you out of Egypt with his own presence, by his great power, driving out before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land for an inheritance, as it is to this day. Know therefore today, and lay it on your heart, that the Lord is God in heaven above, and on the earth beneath; there is no other. Therefore you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in there, but to love the Lord, for he has loved us. Specifically, I'm not going to say us, I don't want to insert us in there, but for he has loved them and their forefathers. I spell that right? I think so. Anyway, um, so, we don't see the words here, but this, for he has loved them and their forefathers, this is basically a longer way of saying he has shown steadfast love, which, as we've covered up to this point, has been the sole context of love when it comes from God. So this is the only way that we are told of God's love up until this point, which I just think is really, um, it's really important that up until now it's just been the phrase steadfast love, but as we see, even as it changes later on here, if we go back, right, um, it does mix in other forms um, of love, like Deuteronomy 7:7. The Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you the fewest of all people. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from all the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. We see steadfast love, steadfast love. He will love you, bless you, multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your wine and your oil, and increase your herds and the young in your flock in the land that he swore to your fathers to give you. Um, so almost all of these, when it comes to love from God to man, to Israel specifically, it's still that continued steadfast love. Um, it's just in this breakdown that Moses is giving the people, he's just much more explicit about it. So he's very explicit, and he's a lot more he expounds on it a lot. So whenever he's explaining this steadfast love, he's usually using more words than just the steadfast love word to explain the love of God to them, just to remind them, hey, this is the love of your forefathers, you know? Even though the generation before, um, when they were receiving the law, right, in Exodus, we didn't see much of the word love. Leviticus, we did not see any. And in Numbers, we only saw a few instances. Um, and as they went on, we start to see this happen a lot more to this new generation where we're going to just pound this idea of steadfast love and faithfulness into their head. Um, so I think for this one, I could go through in excruciating detail um, all of the steadfast loves here. But I think for the sake of conciseness, while generally I wouldn't do this, um, but Deuteronomy is a very specific sense in that um, there's going to be a lot of parallels, right, between what we've already gone over, particularly from Exodus to Numbers, and what we're seeing now. Um, the important parts to highlight is just going to be more of that look at how often the love of God is being brought to the new generation. Um, and I think that in a lot of ways, as we see kind of, at least to me, a resurgence of people coming to the faith, of young kids coming to the Lord, um, kind of as there's a passing of the torch, if you will. Um, I think that without getting political, I think love is a very important topic, and the love of God has become a very important topic. It's a topic that is fluid in its definition, um, that, we're seeing kind of several definitions of love um, come out in culture right now that we're seeing kind of a twisting of what the love, at least in the Old Testament, what the love of God looked like. And, um, I think as we come into Deuteronomy here, the important part is going to focus on when we talk about God's love in Deuteronomy. Yeah, I saw that right. Um, just as we're a new generation, um, from our own parents and from, at least in America, um, kind of a previous, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, so America is big on, say, revival culture. If anyone's watching this who doesn't live in America, just to inform you, we had what were called crusades, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Um, in the 50s and 60s, we were having kind of revivals. There's the Azusa Street revival that's in our history. Um, that was, I believe, in the early 1900s. Um, and that's kind of where this whole idea of revival started in American church, low church specifically. Now, low church being um, kind of a decentralized church where you have high church. So, high church and low church, if anyone ever uses these terms, really what they're talking about is high church is going to be a much more organized religion, um, where you have, uh, very clear lines of not only authority, but what's the word I'm looking for? Headship, should I say, right? Where, deacon goes to a bishop goes to a priest goes to uh, um, I can't think of the words. I'm not from a high church background. Um, Archbishop, that kind of thing. That's the word I'm looking for. But there's like a clear line of um, like head covering, of accountability, um, as well as you'll see a lot more. Um, what's what I'm looking for? You'll see a lot more liturgy, which is a fun word. Um, Liturgy is specifically um, more creeds and doctrines, right? Where these would be things that would be repeated frequently, right? So uh, it's not necessarily a sermon so much as, we follow the Athanasian Creed, right? Or the Nicene Creed, right? Or we recite these creeds and kind of statements of faith. Um, they're going to be very big on having liturgy. Low church, on the other hand, is where um, perhaps there's a pastor, and maybe he's got a council of elders, but that church, instead of, let's just split this down the middle here. So, um, high church, I think the best way to do this would be high church is a big circle, right? And then inside that circle are two areas. And then inside of that circle are perhaps five areas or so, or six, seven. You get the idea, right? And then this side has churches that are inside of that net. And then inside of those nets are other nets. And those churches fit inside those. So there's a clear line, you know, um, where these churches all fit in a clear unit of succession that all fits inside the main church structure. A low church, right? They might have, say, a church over here, a church over here, and a church over here. Now, these three might be connected, right? So, where they have multiple campuses or something like that, that's something we're starting to see. And there might be one guy who's in charge of all three, but there's going to be functional people running over here. There's going to be functional people running over here. And the important part is you're not really having this overarching connection where you have a bunch of other churches that are also in the system that are working together. So this is a much more isolated structure in low church than it is in high church. Um, but moral of the story is that in America we saw a lot of resurgence of revivals, and those revivals happened really more in a low church setting. Small community churches where you'd have 100 or so people. They'd come to a town. Tent revivals, those were really big. I have a history in that. My family was very prominent in tent revivals around the country. And so I feel like at least my grandparents were very involved in this revival culture. Um, And then, perhaps over the last 30 years, we've really had that whole concept die down. Um, so churches are more prominent than ever. We have a ton of churches, but the quote unquote revival concept um, kind of took a turn, and you saw it in um, a lot in popular culture. We really saw an attack against the gospel, as well as more specifically the concept of love. Um, that's been a very, very big one. I feel like the goalposts on where love sits have moved a lot in the last 30 years. Um, and so I think Deuteronomy is a really important book. Um, in terms of in the culture today, I wholeheartedly believe that this second generation, if you will, is going to seek to come back to the Lord. And so I personally see a shifting culture where we're really ironing out again what love is. Like we've swung really far in one direction, and now it seems like momentum's carrying us back this way. Um, and as we are, right, the important things of Deuteronomy, which are to love God and keep His commandments. Um, I just think that that's um, very important. So as we go through, what we're going to see is we either going to see steadfast love explicitly, or it will be implicit, the phrase itself, by him expounding on the word. So it might get uh, a little longer because he loved your fathers and chose their offspring after them and brought you out of Egypt with his own presence by his great power, which is a very long way of saying because he made a commitment and showed steadfast, faithful love to your forefathers, right? It's just a much longer, more explicit way of saying it, but the word itself is kind of implied. Um, so we're going to see that a lot in Deuteronomy. So I think we're actually going to go through Deuteronomy pretty quick this evening. Um, and I'll just keep a tally on the side, but we won't need to go too long into this. So let's go ahead and do implicit, explicit. Now, these are just for God's love. So we'll get to the other verses whenever it's talking about man's love for God. We'll get to that, and we'll go into context a little more on those. But real quick here, so Deuteronomy 4:37, that's implicit. Deuteronomy 5:10, explicit, steadfast love. Deuteronomy 6:5, that's love the Lord. Deuteronomy 7:7, that's implicit. Deuteronomy 7:8, that's implicit. Know therefore that the Lord your God, his steadfast love with those who love him, explicit. Deuteronomy 7:12, steadfast love, explicit. Deuteronomy 7:13, he will love you, bless you, and multiply you, implicit. He will keep the covenant. And now Deuteronomy 10:12, and now Israel, to love him, to serve the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 10:15, Yet the Lord set his heart in love on your fathers and chose their offspring, implicit, you above all peoples as you are to this day. Deuteronomy 10:18, he executes justice for the fatherless and the widow and loves a sojourner. So this is a separate one. We're going to keep a separate tally there. Um, Love the sojourner, therefore. Love the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 11:13. Love the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 11:22. Loving the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 13:3. Love the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 15:16. This is a very separate one. So this is about a servant loving his master. Deuteronomy 19:9. Loving the Lord your God. If a man has two wives, the one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved bore him children, that's a different one. Deuteronomy 21:16. Son of the loved, same concept. Deuteronomy 23:5. But the Lord your God will not listen to Balaam. Instead, the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you because the Lord your God loved you. So I think this is going to count in the separate category, but we went over Balaam last week. That's part of why I went through it, because it's all going to tie back in, but this would count as a separate one. And the Lord your God will circumcise you. You love the Lord your God, loving the Lord your God, loving the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 33:3. Yes, he loved his people. All his holy ones were in his hand, so they followed in your steps, receiving direction from you. Implicit. So, as you can see, God's love comes up specifically 8, 9, 10 times, not counting the sojourner down here. Um, so, out of these 10, implicitly was steadfast love, and explicitly he used the phrase steadfast love 3 times. Um, Clearly, the phrase steadfast love and the concept of steadfast love is super important. Um, Now, most of these we'll go through. I know I just bullet ran those really fast, but we are going to basically just knock them off pretty quick because they're all concepts that we've seen before. So none of these are really new concepts. Um, Showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. That's a callback to Exodus, Deuteronomy 6:5. Uh, let's pop there. So, in context, now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the rules as the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land which you are going over. It is that you may fear the Lord your God. So we're going to start here. This is really cool. So I'm personally studying the fear of the Lord. Fear the Lord your God. You and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, obey, which I commanded you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And with these words I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. So again, doesn't use the word love, but it's a callback to steadfast and the covenant. Uh, to give you with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God who you shall fear, him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you, for the Lord God is in your midst, is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth. You shall not put to the test the Lord. You shall not put the Lord your God to the test, as you tested him at Massa. You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God and his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, that it may go well with you, and that you may go in and take possession of the good land that the Lord swore to give to your fathers, by thrusting out all your enemies from before you, as the Lord has promised. So that goes in a little longer, um, but basically it sets up fear the Lord your God, obey his commandments, and then love him, which he equates back to obey, which he also equates back to fear. So it's really all at once, as well as no idols. So we are in chapter 6 right now. Let me just clear the board, so to speak, and we can pop back over to our search. So Deuteronomy 7:7, it was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. So Deuteronomy 7:7. So this is a chosen people, right? Telling the people to not to intermarry, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods, and the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. Verse 5. But thus you shall deal with them, you shall break down their altars, and dash into pieces their pillars, and chop down their Asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord has set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repays to their face those who hate him by destroying them. He will not be slack with one who hates him. He will repay him to his face. You shall therefore be careful to do the commandment and the statutes and the rules that I command you today. And because you listen to these rules and keep and do them, the Lord your God will keep with you the covenant and the steadfast love that he swore to your fathers. He will love you, bless you, and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, your grain and your wine and your oil, the increase of your herds and the young of your flock, in the land that he swore to your fathers to give you. You shall be blessed above all peoples. There shall not be male or female barren among you, or among your livestock. And the Lord will take away from you all sickness, and none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which you knew, will he inflict on you, but he will lay them on all who hate you. And you shall consume all the peoples that the Lord your God will give over to you. Your eye shall not pity them, neither shall you serve their gods, for that would be a snare to you. So we had a few contexts of love in there. And what 7:7, which is where we were originally, was really trying to say is that they were the least, so that God's steadfast love would prove the most valuable. So it's this idea of um, that um, there are wicked people, they're an unfaithful people, they're a small, few, weak people, and in all of those unfavored circumstances, the Lord's favor can shine brightest, right? Is the concept here. Um, and that's going to cover a few instances of love that are all in chapter 7. I think we got them all. But as you can see, it's really just a repeat and a very long, detailed explanation of the things that we've already covered. Um, so in 7:7, 7:8, 7:9, 7:12, 7:13, we covered all of those. Um, Deuteronomy 10:12. Again, he repeats it. It's the same concept here. So we go to 10:12. And so if we start at the top of chapter 10, just again, uh, we're cutting new tablets. So he's explaining the new tablets, right? And he goes and he gets the law and he's explaining this whole process to them again, right? And so now, after he's explained the story, he tells Israel to, uh, um, he gives them a synopsis. So he's very blunt about it. What does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord, to walk in all his ways, to love him and serve with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments and statutes which I am commanding you today for your good. So, to keep the commandments, which is the phrase we keep seeing pop up, um, this is basically that combination that goes with God's steadfast love. So just as we were talking about where it's a joint commitment or obligation, um, Moses is really ironing out like, hey, remember this steadfast love, remember this joint obligation, remember this commitment, remember, and to pay it back, fear the Lord, obey his commandments, love the Lord, serve the Lord, keep covenant. Right? So to do all of the things other than fear the Lord, obviously, that the Lord would basically show in return to you. So it's that kind of the other half, is to actually do what your parents couldn't. And um, we won't have to get too into it, because Deuteronomy 10:15, same concept, 10:18. Um, This is talking about the sojourner, which we talked about before. He's just reiterating not just to allow the sojourner into Israel, but that God loves the sojourner as well. So it's just constantly repeating this idea that you know God loves God loves His people. So yes, fear Him. Yes, obey Him. Yes, love Him. God loves you. God is steadfast love for you and has to your fathers, has to your forefathers, has to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He has shown love, and now return the love back to him. Um, so 11:1, exact same situation. 11:1, 11:13, 11:22, 13:3. This is about false prophets. Um, to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. But it's all still just, are you keeping steadfast love? And I really don't want to feel like I'm just repeating myself all the time, because this is going to be a lot more of this, because this is basically a repeat of the previous three books. Um, so when we talked about a servant's love for his master, back in Exodus, and in uh, we talked about it in Exodus and Numbers, I believe. Um, we're going to see it again here in Deuteronomy 15. Same exact thing. He's repeating it over again. Deuteronomy 19:9. Loving the Lord your God and walking ever in his ways, then you shall add three other cities to these three. So for context here, let's just pop over. And this is concerning cutting off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and dispossess them and dwell in their cities. You shall measure the distances and divide into three parts the area of the land that the Lord your God gives you as a possession, so that any manslayer can flee to them. So this was a law that they had previously set. I'm not sure if we read through it or not. I think we did. But there was a law that if a man slayed another man, um, I believe accidentally, if he was an accidental kinslayer, then the family of that man um, could uh, basically ask retribution, unless this man specifically, the perpetrator, specifically fled to a specific city, and there was a safe space for them to go, and he could stay there basically until the high priest would pass. So whatever priest was uh, in charge at the time, if that priest passed, then the family could then come after him. Um, so that's what it's talking about here. Therefore, I command you, you shall set apart three cities, and if the Lord your God, verse 7 and 8, if the Lord your God enlarges your territory as he has sworn to your fathers, and gives you all the land that he has promised to give you to your fathers, provided you are careful to keep all this commandment which I command you today, by loving the Lord your God and by walking ever in his ways, then you shall add three other cities to these three, lest innocent blood be shed in your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance, so the guilt of bloodshed be upon you. Um, Not a whole lot to say there, but basically he's saying, um, you know, God will have steadfast love, and if you follow God's plan and show him steadfast love in return, then you are going to increase, and your numbers will become so great that having just three cities for manslayers, manslaughter offenders to flee to, those three cities won't be enough. You'll need more, because there will be so many, and we don't want to see innocent bloodshed. So, you figure how many accidental deaths would be caused, right? Probably a higher number than we have today, but the numbers aren't huge. I mean, it's not like we're suffering a huge population crisis of people just accidentally killing each other. So percentage wise, it's probably not all that high. So when he says, we're going to increase your population so far to the point that you'll need six cities just to contain all of the ones who commit manslaughter, that's pretty faithful. Um, I think up until Deuteronomy 21, I think this is where we're going to stop today, um, because Deuteronomy 21 is a lot to get into, about uh, a man having two wives, especially in consideration with Jacob, um, and Abraham, and I just want to stop and take time and go through this, um, to be able to cross-reference things, and I think it'll take a little too much time. Um, So as always, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. I don't know how long we've been going on, but it seems like it's a while. Um, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening. I hope this has blessed you. I'm really enjoying doing the study myself, and it's really opening my eyes a lot. I'm seeing a lot of personal growth and change, just from going through uh, love, and more importantly, it's highlighting a lot of places where I fall short for me. Um, I'm looking to get married, here in 5 months. Um, and so I'm really glad that I'm going through this because I want to have a much more concrete understanding of love. Um, before, I say I do, I want to make sure um, that I really am leaning on God's word to uh, influence my own emotions, and to place my emotional well-being and health and responsibility into God's hands, and to listen to my creator who made me and let him tell me how I'm supposed to live and feel and love. And I feel like, um, I know we were kind of getting into this earlier with this redefinition of love and everything else, and um, I think we lose sight of that a lot, um, at least in my country, in America. We tend to go off of what we feel and how we love, and what is your love language, right? And all of that stuff's important, all of that stuff is important, but is it in submission to how the Lord, has set us up, has designed us to love? So we might have preferences and other things, but I really want to make sure that, oh, once oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. But are we not just thinking about how we love and which ways of love are best for us, but are we submitting those things to the Father and letting him tell us what is the not just the best way, but what is the right way, for us to love, and to let everything flow out of that, instead of trying to take our ideas and then fit them in. I think it's kind of the other way around, where we take his ideas and see how that fits into us. So hopefully this blesses you.